Olá, pessoal! I think I'm live. Let me just type in the window here. Welcome to the, wait, that's the camera. Welcome to the live workshop about the subjunctive. First of all, I want you to confirm if you can see me and you can hear me, okay? Just type in the chat window right on the right-hand side of the video. Okay. You can see me and you can hear me. Right? I have confirmation that, okay, I can see you and hear you. Thank you, Jennifer. Bom, welcome again to the live workshop about the subjunctive in Portuguese. If you haven't introduced yourself, you can do that in the chat window on the right-hand side of the video. There's already a lot of you saying hello. And wait a second, let me just move windows around a little bit. First of all, I'm going to tell you what this is going to be about, what you can expect to learn today. And hola, Cris. Hola, Ian. Hola, Pamela. And what we'll be doing today, okay? So we are going to be talking about the subjunctive. Many of you already probably know what it is, and probably already know a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today. But nevertheless, it's good to review these things, especially the subjunctive, which is quite complex. If you are new to the subjunctive, then this is going to give you a good overview of what you can do with it, how you can build it, and where you're going to use it. Of course, to know where you're going to use it and when you're going to use it, that's a big, complex topic, and I'm not going to be able to cover all the different possibilities today. But I'm going to share with you what I consider to be the most common situations in everyday life that we use the subjunctive. So all these expressions and conjunctions and whatever that is that needs subjunctive or that need the subjunctive. So I'm going to be telling you what I consider to be the most common ones. And if you know these, then at least you'll be able to understand most of the subjunctive used on a daily basis, okay? That doesn't mean that there aren't other common or important expressions that use the subjunctive. And I highly advise you to look them up and practice with them also if you want to understand the news or if you want to read books. So don't just stick with these that I'm going to be talking to you about today, but definitely these are what I consider to be the most important ones, okay? Right, I'll be answering your questions as well, so if you have any questions, write them in the chat window. I can't promise you that I will see them immediately, but bear with me because I have to talk to you and read the chat at the same time. So if I don't see your questions immediately, then just type again, okay, and let me know. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you. And first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what is the subjunctive and why we need it. Well, actually, before I share the screen, let me just explain a little bit about that. The subjunctive, pretty much what you're going to be learning are verb tenses. You're going to need to know how to conjugate them and when to use them. And these verb tenses are going to be used to talk about possibilities, wishes, desires, things that are not real, that could be real but are not, that could have happened but didn't, that probably are going to happen but we are not sure, or that are very unlikely to happen. So you see, we are not talking about facts. Now you may think that, okay, that's enough to understand when I'm going to use the subjunctive, but actually it really isn't. It gives you an idea, but you cannot really see this as a rule because there are going to be situations where you're going to think, well, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't sound like a wish, or this is a wish. Why aren't we using the subjunctive here? So you always have to be careful when it comes to rules in language because, you know, language is this very complex thing, and it doesn't always follow the rules as we would like it to. So you got to be a little bit flexible here, okay? So that being said, I'm going to share the screen, and I hope you can see it. There's usually a little bit of a delay between what I say and what you see. So I can only confirm that you're seeing it in a few seconds. Okay, now you're seeing it. So what I have here is pretty much what I just told you. The subjunctive refers to these desires, wishes, possibilities, doubts, feelings. So I'm not going to use it when I say it's raining or it rained, because that's a fact. I'm going to use it when I say it might rain. If it rained yesterday, then I would have needed an umbrella. If it rains tomorrow, then I have to get an umbrella. Okay, so this is the type of situation where we use the subjunctive. And it's very common. And the problem sometimes is that when you're learning Portuguese, you only get to the point of learning subjunctive when you are already intermediate or pre-advanced learner almost sometimes. And the problem with that is that you miss a lot of what's being said on a daily basis because it's being used all the time. So you can also consider it almost basic Portuguese, the subjunctive, because it's so common. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea. I'll just move along because we have a lot of stuff to talk about. And first of all, I'm going to tell you what verb tenses you can expect in the subjunctive. This may be a little scary if you didn't know yet, but there are 6 verb tenses in the subjunctive. Not as many as in the indicative mood that has to do with facts, but still, these are 6 new conjugations that you have to learn, and that makes it especially hard. What you see here are the 6 verb tenses, and I'm going to tell you how to build them individually and when to use them in general, each of them. And let me just check the chat window real quick to see if anyone has any questions so far. Okay, people are saying hello. It's okay. Hello, people. Okay, so here on the left we have presente, present subjunctive. Then we have imperfeito, past subjunctive. And then we have futuro, that's future subjunctive, okay? Now you think, okay, that makes sense. Present when I talk about the present, past when I talk about the past, and future when I talk about the future. It could be that's obvious, but it's not really that obvious. But I'll get to that in a second. Okay, first of all, let's just see how to conjugate this. Naturally, I don't expect you to memorize this just by watching this workshop. You can always come back to this video later and go through it at your own time, okay? Okay. And if you survive this workshop, that's already pretty amazing. Okay, present. The way we are going to build the present subjunctive is we are going to start with the first person singular in the present tense indicative. Okay, this might sound complicated, but let's pick a verb and let's choose a regular verb ending in AR. Let's choose andar, to walk. And now what we are going to do is conjugate it in the first person singular in the present tense of the indicative mood, okay? Not the subjunctive mood. Andar. And that is eu ando, okay? Eu ando. Okay, now that you have this word, what you're going to do is you drop the last letter, the O, and then you add E, and. And this word that you have here, and, let me write it down, is going to be the root for all other conjugations. tu, ele, nós, vocês, eles. Okay, so let's write down and. Now we have to add the endings according to person. The first one we already have, and. The second person, andes. These are the endings that we have for the present tense in the indicative mood, so that makes it more or less easy. The first and the third person are the same. Nós andemos, that's the ending, mus, and vocês, eles, andem. That's the ending M. Okay, so first person singular present, drop the O of the first person conjugation and add E, or E in English. And then that's going to be the root for all these different conjugations, and then you add the ending according to person. First and third persons are always the same. Okay, now this gets a bit trickier because, as you know, in Portuguese you have three verb groups, the ones ending in AR, ER, and IR. I'm saying these endings in Portuguese. We have here one ending in AR. Now we will see what happens with verbs ending in IR and ER. Let's choose one. I'm going to choose an irregular one because this is going to be helpful in a while. Let's choose the verb vir. You have two different types of conjugations, the ones end with the verbs ending in AR, and then the ones ending in ER and IR. They are going to be the same. So when the verb ends in AR, you add E. When the verb ends in ER, you add A. So it's kind of a mix. First person conjugation, first person singular, eu, in the present tense. This is an irregular verb. Eu vejo. Okay, the same method, drop the last O, and in this case, instead of adding E, we add A. Veja. So that's the root for all other verb conjugations. Veja. Let's add them all here. Tu, ele, nós, vocês, eles. Veja. I hope you can understand my writing. Veja. 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 Okay, veja, 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 veja. Now you add the same endings as we've seen above. First and third persons are the same. Eu veja, ele veja. Tu vejas, again the S. Nós vejamos, mus. And vocês, eles vejam. Okay? That's what you need to know. You have these two groups, so to speak. You have the ones ending in AR, and then the ones ending in IR. And sorry, I'm already confused with Portuguese and English. Let me just say them in Portuguese. AR, one group, and then the other group, ER and IR. Okay? The first one you add E, the second one you add A. And from then on, you just have to add the endings according to person. Okay? Remember, this is still just the present subjunctive. Let me see if anyone has any questions. None so far? Don't fall asleep, okay? This is important stuff. Sorry. Okay, so that's the present. We'll get back to that in a while. Let's see how we conjugate the past subjunctive or imperfeito do conjuntivo. In this case, we are not going to be using the first person singular in the present tense. We are going to start with the third person. You know, they always have to make these things harder. Plural of the simple past. Okay? Pretérito perfeito simples. Okay? Let's use the same verbs. Andar. What's the third person plural in the pretérito perfeito simples? The third person, sorry, I was copying you. Eles. I'm switching between windows to see the chat window. Eles andaram. Okay, eles andaram. This is what you're going to use to make the same type of transformation you had here for the present subjunctive. Now what happens is that you, instead of dropping the O, this has no O, you're going to drop the ending RAM. Andaram, you drop the ending RAM. And this is going to be the root for all your conjugations. But you also have to add SSE. Andasse. Okay, you remove the rão here in the middle, and then you have andasse. And andasse is going to be the root, okay? So let's write it down here. Andasse. Tu, ele, nós, vocês, eles. And write it down for all of them. Andasse. And thus, if you hear this click, 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 that's my pen. And thus. And what do we do now? We add the same endings that we have seen before. So you see, this is pretty simple. Eu andasse, ele andasse, they are still the same. Tu andasses, nós andássemos, eles andassem. Okay, the same endings as we have seen before. What happens here, just a quick note, with nós, is that you're going to add a graphic accent, andássemos, because usually what you do, you stress the vowel before last. So according to the rule, you would be stressing this E here, andássemos, but because you're stressing this A, the third before last, you always have to include a graphic accent so that the person reading knows that this is where you have to stress the word. Otherwise, it would be here, okay? Andássemos. Andassem. Here you're stressing the vowel before last, so this is according to the rule. You don't have to add any graphic accent, okay? Let's see if, okay, no questions, great. And now you're going to do the same for the verbs ending in ER and IR. And the example we have here is the verb ver. And the verb ver conjugated in the third person plural, in the pretérito perfeito simples, in the simple past of the indicative mood, is eles viram. They saw, okay? Eles viram. Again, you drop the ending RAM and you add SSE. So what we have here as the root for all our conjugations is visse. So let's do the same here. Eu, tu, ele, nós, vocês, eles. Eu visse. Let's write them all down. Visse, visse, visse. First and third the same. Tu visses, nós víssemos, eles vissem. Okay? The good thing about the past subjunctive is that there's no difference between verbs ending in AR or ER or IR. So you always have the same method. In the present subjunctive, you have different endings according to verb group, okay, what we have seen here. But this is not the case in the past subjunctive. All right? Finally, futuro, future subjunctive. The good thing about this one is that you're going to use the same conjugation. You're going to start with the same one, with the third person plural in the simple past. And oh, just a second. There's a window popping up. Okay. Sorry, problem of live streaming. Okay. You're going to use the same person, third person plural, pretérito perfeito simples. Let's continue with the same verb, andar. Eles andaram. The difference here is that instead of dropping RAM, you only drop AM. So you get andar. Now you may think, well, that's exactly the same as the infinitive. Why should I go through all this trouble of conjugating the third person plural of the simple past before I start conjugating the future? Well, this will be useful when you have irregular verbs, and we will see in a few seconds with the verb vir why it's necessary to go and fetch the third person plural in the simple past. Okay. Oh, by the way, nós víssemos, again here, you have to add the graphic accent in the first person plural, okay? So that you know you have to stress víssemos, víssemos. So back to the future. This is going to be the root. So let's write them all down. Eu, tu, ele, nós, vocês, eles. Andar, 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 andar. Excuse me. Now about the endings. First and third the same. Tu andares. Pay attention here that besides adding S, you also add E. Otherwise, this would be impossible for us to say it. Andares, andares, andarmos, the same ending, and andarem. Again here, besides the M, we also add E, andarem. Right? And the same method is going to be applied to all, this applies to all verbs. So let's see how this works out with an irregular verb. We already have the third person plural in the simple past here, viram. Eles viram, you drop the M, so we have vir. Now you see that this root that you're going to use for all conjugations is not the same as the infinitive, that's vir. Okay, so that's why it's important to go and fetch the third person plural in the simple past. Eu, tu, ele, nós, vocês, eles. Eu vir, 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 vir. Okay? First and third the same. Tu vires, extra E. Nós virmos, vocês, eles virem, extra E. Okay? So this is what you need to know to conjugate all verb tenses in the subjunctive. And I say all because these three here that we haven't talked about yet are going to use these conjugations here. So they're kind of simpler to conjugate, okay? Let me just see if there's any questions. No accent on visum. Yeah, okay, I added the accent in the meantime. Pamela asks, and that's a good question, is that the same as the personal infinitive? So you are referring to the future subjunctive? Let me address that question because that's a good one. So you'll see here with a regular verb, like the verb andar, that this conjugation that you have here, let me just switch the color to make it a little bit more interesting. What you have here in this conjugation, this looks the same as the personal infinitive. Personal infinitive. If you don't know what that is, it's another verb tense. And as the name indicates, you start by conjugating it using the infinitive. And indeed, what you see here is the infinitive. And the endings that you add to these different persons that you have here are the same. So when we are talking about Regular verbs, the conjugation of the future subjunctive and the personal infinitive is exactly the same. Meanings different and are used in different situations. But when you have irregular verbs, you're not going to have the same conjugation because the future subjunctive is going to start with this root that we got from the third person plural in the simple past that is not the same as the infinitive. Okay, so this conjugation here in the personal infinitive would be something like, eu ver, tu veres, you see that it has the same ending, ele ver, nós vermos, eles verem. So you're only going to see the difference between these two verb tenses when it comes to irregular verbs. Sorry, because the irregular verb in the future subjunctive does not start with the infinitive. Okay? Hope this answers your question. Jenny asks, did you write andare or andare? So the difference between M and N. Okay, I get that a lot. So when I write this, this is my M and this is my N. Okay, two legs, one leg, as we say. Anyway, okay, this is M. Okay, moving on. These are the main conjugations, and these three that I'll show you now are compound verb tenses in the subjunctive. This means that they have two verbs and that they have one auxiliary verb and then a past participle. Okay, don't freak out just yet. Let's see what this is going to mean. There's going to be a relation between the present and the present perfect, the past or imperfeito and the past perfect, and the futuro or future and the future perfect. We are going to need to know how to conjugate each of these tenses to create the compound verb tenses. So looking at the present perfect or pretérito perfeito composto, what you need is the verb ter plus a past participle. A past participle, if you don't know, is a transformation you make to a verb so that it refers to a finished event. And this is going to be the same verb all around, the same word all around. You don't have to conjugate it or do anything with it. It always looks the same. The only thing you need to conjugate is the auxiliary verb. Okay, so let's grab these two verbs here, andar and ver, and let's make the past participle of both. Andado and visto. These two words are the past participle of the main verbs we just conjugated here above, okay? Now we need to conjugate the verb here, that's the auxiliary verb. And what we need to build the present perfect subjunctive is the verb ter conjugated in the present subjunctive. Okay? Eu tenha andado. So what you have here is the verb ter. If you go through all the steps that I told you, you start with the first person singular in the present tense, tenho, you drop the O and add a, because, or a, because it's a verb ending in er. And then you have tenha, okay? And then this is the root, and to all conjugations, you add these endings that we've seen before. Tu tenhas, ele tenha, nós tenhamos, eles tenham andado. Like I said, the past participle remains the same. You don't have to change it. Tu, ele, nós, vocês, eles. Okay, let me see if there are any questions. Not yet. Okay, so present perfect subjunctive uses the auxiliary verb ter in the present subjunctive plus the past participle. That's the pretérito perfeito composto. Then you have the past perfect subjunctive. That's pretérito mais que perfeito composto. Sorry for these long names. I can't change them. And guess what? You are going to use the verb ter plus a past participle, and the verb ter is going to be conjugated in the past subjunctive. Okay? And the past participles are always the same. Say, eu tivesse andado, tu tivesses andado, ele tivesse andado, nós tivéssemos andado, eles tivessem andado. And the future perfect subjunctive is going to use, again, the verb ter and the past participle, and the verb ter is going to be conjugated in the future subjunctive. Se eu tiver andado, tivermos, tivessem. Okay? Andado. And the same thing with the verb visto. Tiver visto, tiveres visto, tiver visto. Okay? The past participle never changes. How did you create this conjugation here of the verb ter in the past perfect subjunctive? Here, we started with the third person plural in the simple past. Tiveram. Okay, we dropped the RAM and then we added SSE, tivesse. And here we started again with tiveram, but we dropped AM and then we have tiver plus the endings. Okay? Oh, so that's all about the conjugation. That's only about the conjugation, okay? That's how complicated this is. But a good way to get used to these different conjugations, okay, besides doing grammar drills, I personally find them useful because I get all these different conjugations nicely organized in my head, and I can recall them easily if I practice a lot with these conjugation drills. So that works for me, but that alone will not do it for you. I suggest that you expose yourself to a lot of input, read a lot, listen a lot, and that way you will get used to the conjugations without having to try and memorize them. Question: tivessem ou tiverem no futuro perfeito composto? Futuro perfeito composto. Tiver. Sorry. Okay, you're paying attention. That's good. I was using the past perfect here. Tiverem. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so now when are we going to use this? Okay, and this is going to be a bit complicated, okay? But I'm going to explain this with examples, and hopefully this will make more sense. So first of all, let's start with the present subjunctive. When are we going to use this? Let me choose a different color here, like blue. You are going to use it to talk about events that are going to happen now. So in general, you're talking about the present or the future. So these are all wishes and doubts, and so we are not talking about facts, so they didn't happen. You can say you're talking about the future in general, okay? When you're using the present, it's still to come. And when you're using the future, the same thing. You're talking about things that haven't happened yet. The difference between using the present and the future is that the future makes it, when you use the future subjunctive, it makes it sound like something more distant and not necessarily in terms of time that's going to happen in 10 years from now, not necessarily that. It just makes it sound like less probable, okay? Not so probable as the present. So these two, when they are used in the same situations, choosing between one or the other is kind of a subtle difference. There are situations where you can only use the future subjunctive, you cannot use the present. So that makes it clear that you have to use the future. But in situations where you can use one or the other, the difference is that it's kind of a subtle difference. The future makes it sound like not so probable. Okay. Now this one here, it's kind of a different thing. You are going to use it when you want to talk about very unlikely or improbable events. Stuff that you're sure are not going, something is definitely not going to happen, or is very unlikely, or something in the past that when you were in the past was something that was unlikely to happen in the future. Okay, so the past subjunctive you're going to use to talk about events in the future or events in the past. And in both these situations, they are unlikely. So when you're talking about events in the past, you're not saying it didn't happen. You are kind of transporting yourself to the past and looking to the future, talking about an event that was unlikely to happen in the future. Okay? So the past subjunctive always refers to something that is very improbable. This is just the generic gist of things, okay? These three, I'm not going to go into much detail about these three here, the compound verb tenses. They are going to be used in the same situations as these. So when you use the present subjunctive, you can also use the present perfect subjunctive. When you use the past subjunctive, you can also use the past perfect subjunctive, and so on. The difference is that when you use the compound verb tenses, you are referring to finished events. So you are focusing on the finished event, okay? But like I said, I'm not going to go over these three, the compound verb tenses today, because that would be too much. I think it's already really good if you have an idea when to use the present, the past, and the future subjunctive, okay? Okay, now let's start with examples. And I'm going to add them here on top. I'll write an example for present subjunctive. After I'm going to show you a text where I have all, it's a short text, where I have all these expressions that I consider to be the most common ones that you'll most likely encounter on a daily basis, so that you have a sense of when to use all of this in context, okay? But now, just to have one example of each, I'm going to write down an example for each of these three verb tenses, okay? Sorry, I'm still sniffing a bit. It's better that you buy a car, okay? It's better that you buy a car. That's the example I'm going to use here in the present subjunctive. É melhor que compres carro. It's better that you buy a car. Have I bought the car yet? No. Am I going to buy it? I don't know, but this is just my advice. It's better that you do it, but I'm not really sure if this is going to happen. So the subjunctive here kind of makes sense, okay? It's better is one of those expressions where you're going to use the subjunctive. And the subjunctive here is in this verb, comprar, to buy. If you start with the first person singular in the present tense, compro, drop the O, add E, because this verb ends in AR, and then you add S for the second person singular, compres. So it's better that you buy a car. Now let's see the same example in the past subjunctive. And what I want to point out here is that you have to pay attention to all verbs in the sentence, they kind of have to match. If you have this verb here in the past subjunctive, you cannot keep this verb in this expression in the present. Okay? Although this is the indicative, it's better, it is better. Era melhor que comprasses carro. Era melhor que comprasses carro. So the same expression here, the same verb, but now conjugated in the past subjunctive. And if you start with a third person plural in the simple past, compraram, you drop the RAM, then you add SSE, comprasse, then you add S for the second person, as you did here. Notice that this verb in the expression also changes to the past. And in Portuguese, this is called imperfeito do conjuntivo. And what you have here is also imperfeito, but not of the conjuntivo, but of the indicative. Imperfeito indicativo. Okay, so what I want you to pay attention in these examples is really that you have to look at the whole sentence, not just conjugate the verb that you are going to conjugate in the subjunctive, but the rest of the sentence has to make sense. Questions? Carol asks, is it the same if you say it's better if you buy a car? We'll see that now in using the future, okay? Well, the first expression in this case, it's not going to matter because what is going to influence the verb is the word se, if. That's what determines that what comes next is the future subjunctive. But let's start with é melhor se. So it's better if you buy a car. É melhor se comprares carro. And the difference between this sentence and this one in the present subjunctive is that here you have the word if, and after the word if, you need the future subjunctive. And what you see here is the same verb, comprar, third person plural in the simple past, compraram, drop the am, it looks like the infinitive here, and then you add es, okay, for the second person. É melhor se comprares carro. It's better if you buy a car. So this kind of gives you just an idea how to conjugate them. Some examples, pay attention to all verbs in the sentence, not just the one you're conjugating in the subjunctive. Carol says, I also thought se could be used with imperfeito. Yes, and you can. That's what makes this all confusing, is that some expressions can be used with different subjunctive verb tenses. And you can also use se with the past subjunctive. But I'll move on to the text now, and then you'll see more examples and how to use this in context. And I'll also tell you in which situations you can choose between different subjunctive verb tenses, okay? Right, so what I have here is a short text, short in my, that's my concept of short. And all of these sentences use subjunctive, and this text makes sense. So you see that you can actually say what's here, and it will sound natural, and all of these sentences use subjunctive. So that's how important it is. What you have in orange is the expression that needs the subjunctive, and all these expressions in orange are the ones that I consider to be the most important ones. So if you want to, that doesn't mean that there aren't others that are also important, but if you want to start somewhere, and if I had to choose between them, then I would say these are a good place to start. Pamela asks, what's the exact meaning of each sentence in English? Okay, let's go back. I'll go, do you mean these examples or the text? Let's just start with the text because I'm going to give you the translation of each sentence here, okay? Okay. Sorry. É importante, let's start with the first one. É importante que reserves o quarto de hotel antes da viagem, mesmo que vás de férias em novembro. Okay, what this sentence means is, it's important that, so this expression uses it's an impersonal expression, and there are several like this one. It's important, it's better, it's advisable, it's preferable, it's important, I don't know, that's the one, it's important. So you get the idea. All these expressions followed by que, then you need the subjunctive. So it's important that you book the hotel room. So that's the verb reservar, before the trip, antes da viagem, mesmo que vás de férias em novembro. Mesmo que, that's even if. So I'll write it down here. It's important that you book your hotel room before the trip, even if you go on vacation in November, so when no one else is going. Even if, and then you have vas. That's the verb ir in the subjunctive. Let me just check the questions. Can you just confirm what the translation of the imperfect would be in English? It would have been better if you bought. Would have been better, that would be... Okay, let me just go back to these examples because I see you need translations for this. É melhor que compres carro. It's better that you buy a car. Now with imperfect, and I know you always strive to have translations, but trust me, at some points it's not going to, you're not going to see any difference in English. So it's really important that you understand the meaning in Portuguese. What this means is, era melhor que comprasses carro. This means it would be better if you buy a car. The person hasn't bought the car, and I'm giving some advice saying it would be better if you buy a car. But because I'm using the past subjunctive, this means that I consider this to be very unlikely. I think you're not going to buy a car, but I think that it would be better if you buy a car, okay? That's the meaning. Here, when you use the future subjunctive, like I said, the difference between the present and the future, sometimes it's not really that clear in terms of meaning. So in both cases, you are talking about the future. So this expression remains the same. It's better if you buy a car. It's the same translation, okay? The difference is that because you have se, if, then you have to use the future subjunctive. Just because, okay? I hope this answers your question. All right, and I saw some questions somewhere about whether this workshop would be is going to be available after, and yes, it's going to remain on YouTube, so go ahead and leave now if you have to. Don't worry about it, but I know this is a dense topic, so you will have time to process this later if your head is melting now, okay? So going back to our text, it's important that you book. We'll look at these conjugations in a while. The hotel room before the trip, even if you go on vacation in November. So that's the verb reservar. start with the first person. This is the present subjunctive. Start with the first person singular, reservo, drop the O, add E, and S for the second person. It's important that you book. When you see this conjugation, you know this refers to tu, even though the pronoun is not here, okay? Pronoun is usually out of the picture. É importante que reserves o quarto de hotel antes da viagem, mesmo que, even if, vás de férias em novembro. This brings us to irregular verbs in the subjunctive. The verb ir is one of them. So in this case, you cannot follow the rules we've seen before. You have to know this independently. If you would follow the rule, you would have vou. So there's no O to drop here. You have to drop both letters and then add A with an accent. Okay, you get the picture. You can't really follow the rule in this case, okay? Desde que faças as coisas com algum tempo, não vais ter problemas. Desde que, as long as. Like I said, you don't have to, don't try to, I suggest that you don't try to memorize these expressions. Like I have the list of expressions that use subjunctive in my head, because I don't think that's going to help you much unless you're going to have an exam or something where you need to finish sentences after certain expressions and then you can recall the list in your head, but you get the picture. That's not really going to help you much. You can indeed practice with some grammar exercises, but there are a lot of expressions that need subjunctive. For you to get used to them, the best thing you can do is to listen a lot and read a lot, so that they you get used to them and they become natural to you, so that when you are using a verb after a certain expression, you will know that whether it sounds good or it sounds bad. Naturally, this is a process that takes time, but I think it's very effective. So read as much as you can and listen as much as you can in Portuguese. These will come up all the time. This is all about repetition, right? But if you read and listen to texts and dialogues, whatever it is that interest you, because they have context, because there's a story, because you're making connections in your brain between all of the sentences, it makes sense in your head and it's easier for you to remember them. And they always keep coming up, whatever it is that you're reading or listening to, they will always be coming up. Okay, continuing. As long as, desde que, as long as you do things with some time, you're not going to have any problems, any issues. So as long as is followed by present subjunctive, and that's the verb fazer. If you don't recognize it, you start with the first person, faço, drop the O, add A, sorry, faça, and then S for the second person, faças. Desde que faças, as long as you do things with some time, you're not going to have any problems or issues. That's also a very common one, desde que. A não ser que fiques em casa de um amigo, então não precisas de um hotel. A não ser que, unless. I know it's a long expression. A não ser que, unless you stay at a friend's, then you don't need a hotel. What we have here is the verb ficar. First person, fico, drop the O, add E, and then S for the second person. Pay attention to this one that because of spelling rules, if you drop the O and add E, this would read fice. So that it reads fique, you have to change the C and add QU, fique, so that you can read fique. A não ser que fiques, unless you stay at a friend's, em casa de um amigo, então não precisas de um hotel. Okay, so we are talking about a friend of mine And I'm saying it's important that you book a room, a hotel room, even if you go on vacation in November. As long as you do stuff with some time, you're not going to have any problems. Unless you stay at a friend's, then you don't need a hotel. Okay? And this would sound like a very natural dialogue, and all these sentences are using subjunctive. Let's see if there are any questions. Ok. Mas, para que tenhas umas boas férias, também é preciso descontrair. But, so that. Para que. So that. Let me take this one. You have good vacation. Good vacation. It's also necessary to relax. Para que plus subjunctive. And what we have here, we have already seen this verb before, the verb ter. Tenho, drop the O, add A and S for the second person, tenhas. So that you have some good vacations, it's also necessary to relax, not only think about the things you need to book, okay? That's the concept behind this sentence. Logo que, as soon as you arrive at your destination, it's likely that you're tired. Logo que, followed by, so that's as soon as. As soon as you arrive at your destination, that's the verb chegar. Chego, drop the O and add A. Okay? Oops. E. Why am I so confused with A's and E's today? E. The thing here, again, because of spelling rules, if you don't add the U, then this would read chege, and we wanted to read chegue. That's why we have to add the U here. Logo que chegues, as soon as you arrive at your destination, ao teu destino, é provável que, it's probable that, and again here we have one of those impersonal expressions. It's probable that you are tired. And here's another irregular verb in the subjunctive. That's the verb estar. Okay, if we were to follow the rules, we would say estou, okay, drop the OU, and then add whatever. It's not going to have an extra J, okay? So this is irregular. Estejas. When you see this here, that this is going to be the root for all conjugations. So eu esteja, tu estejas, ele esteja, nós estejamos, always adding the endings we've seen before, but in this case, the root is irregular. You cannot figure it out using that method. You have to know it. Duvido que consigas fazer muitas coisas no primeiro dia. Duvido que, I doubt that. So when you're talking about doubts, sorry, I doubt that. I doubt that, so I consider this to be unlikely, so to speak. You could kind of try to get this meaning like this. I doubt that you can do a lot of stuff in your first day. Duvido que consigas fazer muitas coisas no primeiro dia. And here we have the verb conseguir, to be able to, in the present subjunctive. Espero que, I hope that, also a very common one. I hope that, espero que, no segundo dia, don't get distracted by this, because the verb comes right after. I hope that in the second day you already have energy to go on a walk. Espero que no segundo dia já tenhas, again here the present subjunctive of the verb ter, energy to go on a walk. Eu gosto de telefonemas. I like telephone calls. Mas prefiro que me envies um e-mail com fotografias. but I prefer that. Again, a common one. I prefer that. So all these verbs that you see here, preferir, esperar, duvidar, that have to do with likes, opinions, doubts, hopes, they all are followed by subjunctive. I prefer that you send me an email with photographs. So I like telephone calls, but I prefer that you send me an email with photographs. And here we have the verb enviar in the present subjunctive. Envio, drop the O, add E, because this verb ends in AR, then S for the second person. Okay? Precisas de uma máquina fotográfica que seja boa. You need a camera that is good. Here we have that. This is a relative pronoun. And the important thing here is that before the que, you have an indefinite well, it's a noun in this case, it's indefinite. You have the indefinite article. You need a camera that is good. Does this camera exist already? No, you need one. You still have to find it. We don't know if it exists, okay? So this is not really a fact. You don't need the camera that is good. You need a camera. We don't know where it is. You still have to get it. Because this is an indefinite concept preceding que, then what comes after is the subjunctive. And that's the subjunctive of the verb ser. Again, an irregular verb. Okay, every time you see this J here in the subjunctive, you're looking at an irregular verb. No questions so far. If I miss a question, please just ask again, okay? Okay, não acho que, I don't think that. I don't think that. Why is it important that I don't think that? Because only when you have the verb to think in the negative are you going to use subjunctive. If you say, I think that, think of it like this. You're transforming what you think into a fact. But when you don't think that it is like that, then it's not like that, okay? So it's not real. So important thing here is não. Não acho que tenhas de comprar uma máquina muito cara. I don't think that you have to buy a very expensive camera. Não acho que, followed by perfect subjunctive here, tenhas, the verb ter. I don't think that you have to buy an expensive camera or a very expensive camera. If we have eu acho que, so we don't have não, we don't have a negative. Eu acho que, what we have next is the indicative. Eu acho que tens de comprar uma máquina muito cara. So important in this case is to look at the negative here. Não acho que tenhas de comprar. So this is also a very common verb, okay? Eu acho que, eu não acho que. Same verb, but two different situations. Once it's in the negative, then you have to use the subjunctive. Podes tirar fotos com o teu telemóvel. You can take pictures with your phone. Again, similar situation here. Não é verdade que os telemóveis tirem más fotografias. It's not true that mobile phones take bad pictures. Não é verdade que, it's not true that. It's not true that. So what I'm saying is that thing is not real. Mobile phones taking bad pictures is not real. That's why we are using the subjunctive. Again, here the important aspect is the negative, no. Because if you say it's true that mobile phones take bad pictures, then you use the indicative. É verdade que os telemóveis tiram más fotografias. And in this case, you're using present indicative. Okay? The same thing here. Não parece que vá nevar durante as tuas férias. It doesn't seem like it's going to snow during your vacation. Não parece que. It doesn't seem like. Doesn't seem like. Não parece que vá, again the irregular verb ir, here. Não parece que vá nevar durante as tuas férias. It doesn't seem like it's going to snow during your vacation. Just a quick note, all of these verbs so far are in the present subjunctive. We will look, after we finish this text, what we can do to change them if we want to use the past subjunctive or the future subjunctive, or if that's possible at all, okay? Let me just check if there's any questions. Making sense? Okay, great, that's good news. Okay, now a very famous one, talvez, maybe. Talvez chova pouco. Maybe it rains a little. So maybe. That's a very important one. Maybe. And then we have the verb chover. The verb chover is an impersonal one. You don't say I rain, you rain, he rains. But okay, just so that you can follow the method, you think eu chovo, first person singular in the present, drop the O, add a chova. Okay, and this is the third person. It rains. It's the third person. Oops. Third. A thing you might like to know is that instead of using talvez, that needs the subjunctive, you can use se calhar. Whoops. Se calhar. And it means exactly the same thing. It means maybe, and it's used informally, and after it, you use the indicative. Mais indicativo. So if you were to say se calhar instead of talvez, se calhar chove pouco, okay? Chove is the present indicative. So this is a good tip if you don't feel like using the subjunctive after maybe, because maybe is a word that you use a lot, then you can use se calhar and it's followed by the indicative. And this is one of the situations where you ask, well, but that also means maybe. Why am I not talking using the subjunctive if this is something that is not reality yet? It's something that might happen. Well, there you go. Like I said, it doesn't always make sense. So maybe it rains a little. Talvez chova pouco. So far, so that we know what's happening in this story, my friend's going on vacation. I like telephone calls, but I prefer that you send me an email with photos. You need a camera that is good. I don't think you have to buy a very expensive camera. You can take photos with your mobile phone. It's not true that mobile phones take bad pictures. It doesn't seem like it's going to snow during your vacation. Maybe it rains a little. Por isso, não leves roupa como se fosses para o deserto. So it's going to rain a little, maybe. Por isso, so don't take clothes as if you were going to the desert. As if you were going to the desert. As if is always followed by the past subjunctive. Fosses, that's the verb ir. Let's remind ourselves how we conjugate the verb ir in the third person plural in the simple past. Foram, okay? Foram, drop R-A-M, add S-S-E, fosse, plus S for the second person, okay? Remember, if this is too fast for you, don't worry, because you can always watch this video again later and, process all of this information. But like I said, some expressions need specific subjunctive verb tenses. This is one of them. You can also use the compound past subjunctive or the past perfect subjunctive with the auxiliary verb ter. Como se tivesses ido para o deserto. But we are not focusing today on these compound verb tenses, okay? So don't take clothes as if you were going to the desert, because it might rain a little, so that wouldn't make sense. Se, again, here we see if. Se eu for de férias, não te ligo quando lá chegar. If I go on vacation, so I was talking about my friend, now I'm talking about myself. If I go on vacations, não te ligo, I'm not going to call you, when I get there. You can also, if it helps to remember, if you can substitute when with as soon as, so that you know when we are talking about. When I get there. If I go on vacation, I'm not going to call you when I get there. And what we have in both these situations, se and quando, is that we have the future subjunctive. That's the verb ir. Third person plural in the simple past, foram, minus am, that's for. Okay? If I go on vacation, I'm not going to call you when or as soon as I get there. And here again is the future. Chegaram plus minus am, that's chegar. So here we have futuro and futuro. And when I go through this text again, I'm going to tell you when you can use another subjunctive verb tense in these situations, okay? Enquanto estiver de férias, não vou ligar a ninguém. As long as, while I'm on vacation. Não vou ligar, I'm not going to call anyone. Enquanto estiver de férias, não vou ligar a ninguém. Estiver, what is this? That's the verb estar. In which subjunctive verb tense? In the future, okay? Third person plural in the simple past, estiveram. Minus am, estiver. So, as you've probably figured out already, you need to know how to conjugate verbs in the indicative mood. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to easily conjugate the subjunctive. Enquanto estiver de férias, não vou ligar a ninguém. And finally, onde quer que esteja, no matter where I am. This is wherever, onde quer que esteja, that's the verb estar. You see again this J here, this is an irregular verb. Wherever I am. And this expression, you can have wherever, whenever, whomever, okay, the same as in English. What you need to do here is substitute onde with quando, in a sentence that makes sense, of course. Quando quer que seja, whenever that is, or com quem, whomever I'm with, okay? So these are, in my opinion, the most common expressions that need subjunctive. I suggest that you start with these ones. I know how it's like when you start with the grammar book and there are lists and lists of expressions that you can use with subjunctive, and that can get overwhelming really quickly. So if you want to start with expressions that are commonly used in everyday life, then I suggest you start with these ones, okay? And like I said, this text, okay, it's not very interesting, but still it's something that you could say to your friend in a very informal dialogue, and these expressions would be normal and they would use subjunctive, and you cannot use anything else. That would not sound good at all, okay? Okay, so let's look at this text again and see exactly which expressions we can use with which verb tenses, because most of these that we've seen so far use the present subjunctive. And now we'll look and see, can we also use the past subjunctive? What's the difference in meaning, okay? Let me just check if there are any questions, and I'll have a sip of water. Carol asks, is there any place on your site where we can find text and exercises specifically for conjunctive so we can practice? Well, the podcast, the intermediate and advanced dialogues and texts naturally will have subjunctive in them, but no specific exercises. If you're interested in exposing yourself more to input, reading and listening in the intermediate level and above, and also practice with a lot of exercises using the subjunctive, then I suggest you check the Breakthrough Portuguese Academy. There's a link in the description below, and you can practice with different types of content, from real dialogues to short stories, but there's also an in-depth grammar course there that covers all the subjunctive and has also a lot of exercises you can practice with. Okay. Another question, what about this if conditionals in the past tense? Do we need to use past subjunctive for these as well? Okay, so that's what we are going to look at now. I forgot to drink water. Wait a sec. So looking at this text, and maybe I'll just copy it, or maybe not. Let's just change colors. Let's choose, let's choose green. Okay, now let's see all these expressions that use the present subjunctive. You can use the past subjunctive with them as well. And what's going to change is the meaning. As I said, the past subjunctive, you use it when you want to express that something is very unlikely or that you don't believe is going to happen. Okay, so let's see the difference in meaning when I switch to the past subjunctive with these expressions. The future subjunctive is usually used with different expressions. So the present and the past, they kind of have the same expressions, and you use either the present or the past according to what you want to express. The future has kind of its own group of expressions that use the future. So it's kind of easier to know when to use the future, although there are also expressions that use the future that you can also use the past subjunctive with. Okay, now it gets real confusing. Like I said, the best way is not to just sit and try to memorize these expressions and try to memorize when to use that, when to use that. If you expose yourself to enough content, to enough input, if you read a lot, even if you practice with a lot of grammar exercises, as long as it has context and just more than one simple sentence, the longer the context and the more detailed, the better it is, the easier it is for you to remember all of this. And if you do a little bit every day, you know, it's all about repetition. Doesn't mean that you have to repeat the same thing, but repetition in terms of continuously exposing yourself to content, because these expressions keep coming up and coming up. So as long as you expose yourself to content, you will always be practicing the subjunctive. É importante que reserves o quarto de hotel antes da viagem. It's important that you book the hotel room before your trip. Now let's switch to the past. Era importante que reservasses. Okay, what's in green? That's the past. Like I mentioned before, the other verb in the expression needs to be in the imperfeito as well, but of the indicative mood. Era importante que reservasses. What does this mean? It means it would be important if you booked your hotel room before the trip. And I say this when, okay, I know you're not going to do this, but it would be kind of important if you did that, okay? Just saying. But I believe that this is just an opinion and it's not really going to result in a fact. When you see era and this is kind of a different topic, but maybe it's important that you know this as well. When you say era, that's the imperfeito. You can also say seria, and this is condicional. These two are possible. What happens in informal speech is that we tend to use more the imperfeito instead of the conditional. Imperfeito. In English, you say it would be important, and what you're using there is the conditional. And you could also use the conditional in Portuguese, seria, but that's more formal. You wouldn't really speak it. When we speak it, we usually use imperfeito instead of the conditional, okay? So whenever you think in English, it would be, you're thinking in conditionals, you're probably not going to see the conditional or hear the conditional in Portuguese. You're most likely are going to hear the imperfeito instead. Seria importante que reservasses or era importante que reservasses? It would be important if you that you booked your room before the trip, even if you went on vacation in November. Fosses. Okay, again, here you can also use the past. Even if you went on vacation in November. When we are using the past subjunctive, again, to reinforce this idea, we are talking about something that is more unlikely, more improbable, as long as, desde que faças as coisas com algum tempo, desde que fizesses, as long as you did the stuff, booking hotel rooms and whatever, if you did that with some time, you wouldn't have problems. Não terias, that's the conditional. Or let me rephrase this, because here we are using ir ter. We are using the expression ir plus infinitive, so let's transform this one. Again, when you transform one verb to another subjunctive verb tense, you have to check the rest of the sentence to see if it matches, okay? Desde que faças, desde que fizesses, vais ter, irias ter. That's conditional. Ias ter. That's imperfeito. Okay, again, both are possible, but imperfeito is more common. So let's read the whole sentence again. Desde que fizesses as coisas com algum tempo, não ias ter problemas. As long as you did stuff with some time, you wouldn't have any problems. Okay? Everyone alive? I know this is terrible, but there's no way around it, okay? This is going to be important for you to just understand in general what these verb tenses mean, what you can do with them, what you need to pay attention to, like the rest of the verbs need to be conjugated in different tenses as well, not only the subjunctive one. Okay, but don't think like, oh no, I have to memorize all this. Don't try to do that. A não ser que fiques em casa de amigo, unless you stay at a friend's, then you don't need a hotel. A não ser que ficasses, unless you stayed at a friend's, then you wouldn't need. Now, okay, let me underline this. Não precisarias, conditional, you wouldn't need, or as we say informally, não precisavas. Não precisavas, and that's the imperfect. Unless you stayed at a friend, then you wouldn't need a hotel. Okay? All right. Mas, para que tivesses, but so that you had some good vacations, you would also need to relax. Também. seria preciso. It would also be necessary. And era imperfeito, okay? Always the same two possibilities, conditional and imperfeito for more informal speech. So that you had good vacation, it would also be necessary to relax, ok? Para que tivesse umas boas férias, também era preciso descontrair. An important note that I want to do here is that, I'm sorry, my English is going out the window at this point. You see an impersonal expression here, é preciso. And this is similar to é importante, é melhor, okay? Like the one that we've seen here, é importante que. I only want to say that these impersonal expressions can be followed by que, as you see here, plus the subjunctive, or by the infinitive, where am I? Without the que. So another way to simplify or avoid using subjunctive is in these impersonal expressions, you can drop the que and then you can use the infinitive after. É preciso descontrair. Or, if I want to use the subjunctive, é preciso que descontraias. Okay? And que has the subjunctive after. No questions? Okay. Logo que, as soon as, logo que chegasses ao teu destino, as soon as you arrived at your destination, see if I can make some space here. Assim que chegasses, okay, maybe now the sentence doesn't make much sense. Assim que chegasses, let's make a different option here. As soon as you arrived, you could call me. Okay, but I know that you're probably not going to call me when you get there, or you're not going to get there today, or it's going to be too late when you get there. Anyway, as soon as you arrived, you could call me. Podias ligar-me. You could call me. Here we have imperfeito, but you can also use the conditional. Poderias ligar-me. Carol asks, também preciso de descontrair. Would that be correct instead of é preciso descontrair? Let's see what that sentence. Também precisas, sure, you can also say, instead of é preciso, you can conjugate the main verb and say precisas. Também precisas de descontrair. There are always many ways of saying the same thing. Duvido que consigas fazer muitas coisas no primeiro dia. I doubt that you can do a lot of stuff in your first day, you know, because you're tired. Duvido que conseguisses. I doubt that you could make a lot of stuff on your first day. Again here, past subjunctive. Espero que no segundo dia, in your second day, I hope that in your second day you have energy to go on a walk. Esperava que. Esperava. Or esperaria. Okay, this is us changing the other verb in the sentence that is not in the subjunctive, but is imperfect or conditional. Okay, always these two options. I would hope that in the second day you tivesses energia para ir passear. Eu gosto de telefonemas. I like telephone calls. Mas prefiro que me envies um e-mail com fotografias. But I prefer that you send me an email with photos. Eu gosto de telefonemas, mas preferia. I'm not even going to give you the conditional in this case because this just sounds too strange and no one uses. So let's just stick to imperfeito. I would prefer that you send me an email. Preferia que me, and then past subjunctive, enviasses. I would prefer if you sent me an email with photographs, okay? Precisas de uma máquina fotográfica que seja boa. You need a camera that is good. You would need a camera. Again, the same thing all over again. Precisavas, you would need, that's imperfeito. Or precisarias, that's conditional. Precisavas de uma máquina que fosse boa. You would need a camera that was good. Não acho que tenhas de comprar uma máquina muito cara. I don't think that you have to buy a very expensive camera. Não achava. I didn't think. Não achava que tivesses de comprar uma máquina muito cara. I didn't think you would need to buy a very expensive camera. Podes tirar fotos com o telemóvel. Then if you need to change the sentence as well, then you could say, podias tirar fotos com o teu telemóvel. You could take pictures with your phone. Then you switch this one to imperfeito as well. Não é verdade que os telemóveis tirem más fotografias. It's not true that mobile phones take bad pictures. Não era verdade que os telemóveis tirassem. It wasn't true that mobile phones took bad pictures. Now, it depends. You can also say it's not true. Depends on the context. It's not true now that mobile phones took bad pictures back then. Okay. But now, for the sake of changing every verb, we are also changing this one to the imperfeito or conditional as usual. Okay, seria. Moving on. Não parece que vá nevar durante as tuas férias. It doesn't seem like it's going to snow during your vacation. Não parecia. It didn't seem like. Imperfeito. It didn't seem like it was going to snow during your vacation. Que fosse. Não parecia que fosse nevar durante as tuas férias. Talvez chova pouco. Maybe it rains a little, okay, in the future. Talvez chovesse pouco. And in this case, it kind of feels like I need to finish this sentence. Maybe it rained a little if there were more clouds in the sky, you know, something like that. Talvez chovesse pouco se houvesse nuvens, if there were clouds. And here we have se, that you also have to use, where you also have to use the subjunctive of the verb haver. And this one is in the past subjunctive. This one is also in the past subjunctive. Talvez chovesse se houvesse nuvens. There's a question. How does the phrase más fotografias mean bad? Let me look at the sentence. Más fotografias. Más, that's bad. Bad pictures. So mau, that's bad in masculine. Then you have má, and then plural más, bad pictures. Por isso não leves roupa como se fosses para o deserto. So don't take any clothes as if you were going to the desert. Como se, as I said, with this expression you already need the past subjunctive, so we are not going to touch on this one. Se, again, se. With se, as you've seen here in the sentence, you can use the past subjunctive. Se eu for de férias, if I go on vacation, I'm using the future subjunctive. I cannot use the present subjunctive. I have to use either the future or the past. The difference between them is that when I say se eu for de férias, using the future, I am not saying it's unlikely. Maybe I go, maybe I don't go. It's kind of 50-50. But if I use the past subjunctive, then you know that the past is more improbable. Se eu fosse, only if I went on vacation, you know, but that's not going to happen. But if I went on vacation, okay? So when you use the past subjunctive, it always has that extra meaning of talking about something that is kind of a wish, or is not real, or is not going to happen, or it's very unlikely, or you're just imagining, right? You're imagining if that happened. Se eu fosse de férias, não te ligava. I wouldn't call you. Or ligaria. Always these two options. Whenever in English you have would, then you can either have imperfeito, ligava, or conditional, ligaria. If I went on vacation, I wouldn't call you when I got there. Portanto, se eu fosse de férias, não te ligava quando lá chegasse. Changing chegar to chegasse again in the past subjunctive. Okay, let me see questions. Very well. Enquanto estiver de férias, não vou ligar a ninguém. While I'm on vacation, I'm not going to call anyone. Enquanto estivesse, while I was on vacation, enquanto estivesse de férias, não ia ligar a ninguém. Imagine I'm thinking, oh, if I went on vacation, I wouldn't call anyone. I just wouldn't care. Okay, that's the idea here. And again, não vou ligar changes into imperfeito or condicional. Não iria ligar a ninguém. Wherever I was, onde quer que estivesse. Onde quer que estivesse. Okay, so you can see here that the expressions you use the present subjunctive with, you can also use the past subjunctive. But there are some, like this one, como se, that only uses past subjunctive, or the compound past subjunctive, or past perfect subjunctive. And there are some that you can't use the present subjunctive with, like se, quando, enquanto. Okay? Questions. Is it chovesse instead of choveria simply because of talvez? Let me check the sentence. Chovesse. Exactly. So when you have talvez, you have to use subjunctive after it. You can use the present, talvez chova. Talvez chova. Okay, it's likely. I saw the news. There are going to be some clouds in the sky. They say, I don't know, 50% probability of raining. Talvez chovesse, it's this improbable situation. You can use either the present or the past subjunctive with talvez, but you couldn't use the conditional. Would não teria ligado quando ia chegar also work? Like if I had gone on if I had gone to vacation, I would not have called you. Let's see. Each case is a case. Let's see. Teria ligado. Where is that one? Okay. So let me just see both windows at the same time. Não teria ligado. Não te teria ligado quando lá chegar would not work because I wouldn't have called you when I get there. you're talking about getting there in the future, but calling you in the past, so it kind of clashes. You have to have both. In the past, I wouldn't have called you when I got there. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So that's a lot to take in, I know. 1.5 hours later. I think this is a good summary of the subjunctive, how to conjugate it. I know I didn't focus on the compound verb tenses. That will maybe be for a next time. But the important thing is that you know now how to conjugate it in the present, in the past, in the future, when to use the present and the past, usually in the same expressions, when to use the future in different expressions, and that you can also use the past with these expressions. And you have a text here that gives you the most common expressions that you use with the subjunctive. All right. If you're watching this video later on and you have some questions about it, just leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll answer if I happen to see it, but I usually check the comments. So if you have some questions later on, just let me know. Okay, let me just stop sharing the screen if I can find the window. Here I am. Well, I hope this was useful. I hope you come back to this video and process this with a little bit more time. Practice with whatever feels better to you. There's really no wrong method. Grammar exercises if you want, conjugation drills, but whatever you do, read a lot, listen to a lot of Portuguese. That will give you all these expressions with the subjunctive in context, and that helps you memorize them. Yeah, and I hope to see you next time. Check the Breakthrough Portuguese Academy. There's a link below. There's a lot of content you can work with there, and I'm sure that it will help you to understand the subjunctive and the language in general, okay? So, if you don't have any other questions, eu vejo-te para a próxima vez. Tchau, tchau. Até lá.